If you're thinking about divorce, you may be wondering what information you need to have when you go into the divorce process. And gathering that information can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you are the one who wasn't in control of the family finances, for example. My guest here today is Katherine Zimmerman. Katherine is a senior attorney with Hargrave Family Law, and she's here to talk with us today about how to get that information and what information is needed and all the things when it comes to information gathering. So, Katherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So, first of all, you've been practicing family law since 2007.
Yes.
Okay. And did you start practicing here in Dallas?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
I've been practicing in Dallas my whole career.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you have some experience in information gathering.
I do. I do.
So I want to, obviously we know as lawyers that this is one of the areas where the cost can get really expensive when it comes to gathering information. Mm-hmm. So let's start off sort of talking about what people can do to help control those costs and what information is going to be needed at the outset of a case.
Yeah. So if you're going to go see a divorce attorney, if you want to bring documents to your consult, you can. You don't have to, but if you're going to move forward in your divorce case, it's great to have, account statements, actual statements, showing your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, your retirement accounts, any sort of account. People have all sorts of things now, crypto, Bitcoin, and then anything to show your debts to, like your mortgage, your credit card statements, loans that you have. If you give those to your attorney, either at the consult, which you may not want to do that early, but once you hire an attorney and give them that information up front, it makes the case go much faster and is more cost effective.
So you mentioned something that is statements, actual statements. What do people most often give instead of statements? Why do we need to emphasize statements?
Yes. So in the age of smartphones that we are in, everybody has a smartphone now, most everybody. A lot of people are tempted to send screenshots or do send us screenshots as we are helping them, gather and telling them what they need to send us. And sometimes those are helpful, but most of the time it's missing information. So it won't show the case style, or not the case style, the account style, the way the names on the account. A lot of times they don't show the account number. A lot of times they won't even show maybe the date that the balance is given. So it's lacking in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Right. So we actually need the statements. And I would say you brought up a good point in terms of the consultation. We don't need all this information for the consultation. And for the consultation, maybe a screenshot would be helpful just to give a broad overview of the types of assets that you have.
Yeah.
That's sort of general information. But once you hire the firm and you start working with a divorce lawyer, expect to get at least 2 years of statements. So if you're in your bank account, just go ahead and download those PDFs.
Yes. And if you don't have 2 years available, get the year or the 6 months or whatever is available to you, because it's going to make it easier, more efficient, faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what are some other types of records, especially if you have kids, that might be helpful as well?
School records, pediatrician records, daycare records, pick up and drop off. A lot of our clients have disputed times that they want for custody, possession. And so those types of records showing who did what and when can be really helpful and useful, especially if we end up having hearings, or sometimes just to settle a case. Yeah. Oh, you said that you do pick up and drop off every day. Well, here's the record showing that it's actually my client who did pick up and drop off every day.
And same thing with doctor records. Like, it's really amazing the information that a lot of doctors are taking down about the parent who, accompanied the child to the visit, what was wrong, and so forth.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are records that parents should be able to get themselves, right? They don't have to have a subpoena or a fancy document to get those.
Right. I will say it is helpful sometimes if we're going to go to court to have a business records affidavit with those things. So you can get those too. So you could go to your doctor or whoever and say, hey, I actually need these records with the business records affidavit. So we don't have to subpoena. But that is one thing to kind of keep in mind and talk with your attorney about. It's good to coordinate things with your attorney and make sure
you love that.
you're getting things in the format that they want. So
That's right. And that will avoid unnecessary trips of having to go back to the doctor's office and get another printout of all the billing statements.
Yes.
If we can get it once with the affidavit.
Yes.
We've got that.
yeah.
Now, sometimes people don't have access to all the accounts, right? In fact, most often you're not going to have access to your spouse's retirement accounts.
Yep.
They have a 401k or something.
Hmm.
So how do we go about getting records from the other side?
So we have several mechanisms that we can use. We have something called an inventory and appraisement, which is a complete listing of all accounts in everybody's names. And whether they're joint or whether they're, in the single name of the retirement account for that person or the opposing party. And then when we usually exchange those documents with the other side, supporting documents are included normally. So that's one simpler way that we can get them. We also have other mechanisms. We have subpoena power. We have what we call a request for production, which is a much more hefty request for documents and can include larger timeframes if you're wanting to see a lot of history, especially.
Yeah, especially those accounts that aren't in your name. But the first step usually, excuse me, is just to exchange the inventory and appraisement, right? Where each side completes a detailed listing of all the financial accounts primarily.
Yes. Yep.
This isn't usually a list of all the personal property.
Not usually, but
sometimes
super, super detailed clients do give us huge lists of personal property as well sometimes, which is fine. Your attorney, that's something you may want to talk to your attorney about before you go and inventory your entire household, whether they think you need to do that. Most people don't have a huge amount of personal property in terms of value, because even if you bought a $10,000 couch, one thing people are often disappointed to find is that no one else wants to pay $10,000 for the couch again.
Yeah.
So it may only be worth $500, maybe not even that, depending on how long you've had it and how many animals you have in your home and kids. So
exactly. But if people do want to inventory the household, usually what we recommend is just going room by room, create a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Or if you're not savvy with technology, you can just do it with a clipboard on a notepad.
Yes.
But just break it down room by room and, list the furniture and the decor.
Yeah.
Rugs, different things that are in the cabinets, maybe the china or wine collection.
Yeah. And if you do have things that are valuable, for sure, we do want those, like art pieces, china, anything, any sort of heirloom that truly is valuable. That is good to know about.
Most of the time, what we find in our practice is that people will be able to decide between themselves who's taking what. And maybe we narrow it down to just a couple of issues, like if it's the wine collection or the artwork or whatever that is. But we're usually not talking about pots and pans and dish towels.
True. Absolutely true. Thank goodness.
There is the infamous Beanie Baby collection.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Most people.
So let's talk a little bit. You exchange documents and you realize, wow, I'm seeing on these, pay stubs that money's going into an account that's not listed on the inventory. So, you talked about a request for production. So talk a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah. So that is a document that we can send to the other side through their attorney or to them if they're not represented by an attorney, that asks for very specific documents, and it's usually multiple requests. And so we can include very specific things like we want all the statements, for X number of years for this account number ending in, list at least the last 4 digits of that account and where we found it, so that it's specific enough that they know what they need to produce. And you can get, multiple accounts that way. Usually you can ask about community property, separate property. You
can also,
sky's the limit.
You can also ask for communication, for Facebook history.
Yes. Social media is a big one. Yeah. Yes.
And all those text messages exchanged with the babysitter or somebody else
Yes.
might be an interesting party to see what those messages are.
Yes. And it's a great way to make sure that documents are authenticated, because the nice thing about that, even if you happen to have those things in your possession, once the other side produces those in response to requests for production, it authenticates those things to be used in court.
Okay, so if somebody is watching this and they realize, oh my gosh, they can get my text messages between me and the babysitter, and they think I'm going to outsmart the system and delete them, what are the problems that arise when information is deleted?
Yeah, that's a big no-no. So you can actually get in trouble, especially if your case is pending and you delete things while the case is pending. You can have sanctions against you. It's called spoliation, which is it's just a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. And in fact, if you do that and it's proven that you do that, the court can also use that against you in other ways, not just fine you, but also in your overall case say, okay, we're going to hold this against you because we think you did something bad and we're hiding something.
And that might be an instance where we need to bring in a forensic computer specialist who can examine devices and tell us when things were deleted.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so so we talked about requests for production, and actually sending out requests for production is not expensive. It's pretty a low bar.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is once you send out discovery requests,
you usually get it back.
You get it back. And responding to discovery requests is very expensive.
Yeah. Yes.
And what can people do to help streamline the process and lower the costs of that response to discovery?
Get your documents together as soon as possible. And if you have questions, ask your attorney about what things mean. Once we get those requests in, we have 30 days to answer them. So it sees like a long time, but it goes by quick.
It does. And, people bring us documents in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes we get a paper bag or shoe boxes filled with documents.
Right.
Not so much anymore, but it does still happen.
Yes.
But I always say it's really great to talk with your legal team, especially the paralegal, about how to be saving documents, how to title them electronically. So as you're downloading them, you can save them in a format that then makes it super easy for us to turn around and produce.
Yeah. Yes. If you can save things by category, especially because usually it'll have, like the account statements and then maybe doctors and things, and just, as you're going, put them all. A USB drive is also nice.
Yeah. Or we use Dropbox too.
Yes. Yeah. We send our clients Dropbox.
That can take a little tech. If you're not used to that, that's okay. Right. We've got people to help with that. When I think about this, another thing people do often is they will send us screenshots of text messages, right?
Yeah.
And that can be really challenging. It's like putting together a piece of the puzzle, because we can't always tell the date and time when things were sent and what order it goes in.
Right.
So there are some applications like iMazing is an app that we often use where people can download all of that communication into one PDF.
Yes.
And it makes it so much easier.
Yes. Easier on you, easier on us, easier on the court.
And it shows the date and time stamp. So help a lawyer out.
And yourself.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about kind of the documents and how we get those from the parties. What if somebody isn't producing financial records? They're not complying with the discovery requests. I mean, what steps do you take? And then ultimately, how do you get those records?
Yeah. So we have subpoena power in a divorce case, and we can subpoena records directly from the financial institution.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So it means that we similarly put together a request of what we want from the financial institution, and then we send a document to them with a formal subpoena that says, hey, you have to give us these documents by X date. And if you have objection, they can sometimes object, but usually we work through those things and get the documents usually within a couple of weeks. It can take, up to a month or so to get those with time requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
And financial records requests are a pretty streamlined process. I mean, financial institutions are used to receiving those, and there's a timeline.
Yes.
And the party asking for the documents does have to pay for that.
Yeah. So
if that was asked to the other side and they didn't produce it, then you're probably going to want to ask to be reimbursed those costs.
Yes, definitely.
But we can also go to other types of third parties as well. So like employment records sometimes are an issue, right?
Yes.
And so probably you were asked to turn over your employment records if you were terminated from a job, or if you got a new job and we want to see the offer letters. And sometimes people don't turn those things over. So that means then we're going to go subpoena either a former employer or a current employer.
Yeah.
And that could have ramifications, right?
Yeah. Yes. But usually people give the document, a lot of companies are not wanting to spend a lot of time fighting about these issues. They don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, which I guess can be different with employers if there's some loyalty there, because sometimes people do sort of work out deals with their employer if they're in a divorce case for certain things. But a lot of times,
and just to be clear, we don't ever encourage that. The records are going to come out one way or another. And if it comes out that you were making a deal with your employer to not turn over records, that doesn't go over well.
Exactly. So most companies are pretty handily give things over and are not wanting to end up in litigation over those things. Yeah.
All right. So in addition, we've talked about the third party requests. What other types of discovery? And we use the word discovery. That's a formal term. It's in our rules of civil procedure. These are processes that are governed by rules that the lawyers have to follow and litigants have to follow. So what other types of discovery requests are there?
So we have interrogatories where we can ask people questions that are literally under oath. It's sort of like being in court because they have to swear to the answers that they give, which is great if you can't afford to do things like depositions or just have a few topics that you're wanting answers on to kind of nail them down on.
And they're written questions, and they're going to provide us with a written answer.
Yes. Yeah. And then we have requests for disclosures, which allows the attorneys to see kind of what attorneys' fees are going to be, what any testifying experts in a case are going to be, witnesses, because they have to list all the people with factual knowledge about the case. That's a great way to figure out who has information about this case out there that maybe I don't know about.
Right, exactly. And then if necessary, you can take a deposition. So let's talk about depositions.
Yes. So depositions are another mechanism we have. And that is where you can either depose the opposing party or any witness that is critical to the case that you want to get information from. It's a good mechanism to use because you can ask almost any question in a deposition. In court, you are more limited to what you can ask sometimes, but in a deposition, you can ask almost any question and they pretty much have to answer it. And there are only a few exceptions to them having to answer. And so you can find out things that way. You also get to see facial expressions, which is great. So you can kind of tell if somebody's lying, as opposed to when you send interrogatories, they just get to write down their answer and you don't get to see what the face is saying or what the tone is. So it's a great way to figure out things like that.
And a deposition, when you're talking about seeing faces, it can be video recorded. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it can just be a transcript, but a lot of times, if you know you're going to be treading into sensitive territory, it's really good to be able to get the video recording.
Yeah. Yes.
And that also helps preserve testimony in case somebody becomes unavailable at a later date, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. And you can actually use your deposition transcript in a hearing or a trial. It's a great way to, get their testimony in if they're not available, or to impeach a witness if they later change their story.
That happens. So these different layers of discovery can get very costly, and in most cases are not necessary. But we were talking on the way over here that there are really 2 documents that are necessary in most cases. It's hard to imagine not having at least one of those. So talk about what those documents are.
So in most cases, we do the inventory and appraisement, which we talked about a little earlier, and then also a financial information statement, which lets us know your basic expenses. So in a divorce case, one of the things that we do is we sort of have what we call the temporary phase and then the final phase. And the temporary phase, a lot of times we have to figure out, well, who's going to pay what, who's going to be living where, what expenses do people have, what all needs to get covered, who's making what amount of money. And that's the thing that the financial information information statements very helpful for.
It is. And it's a lot of heavy lifting for clients in the beginning because, you may not have had a budget that you've been looking at, and we want to know what have the past expenses been. And so we can go back and look at bank statements and kind of help build that for you.
Yeah.
But of course, the more you're relying on your legal team to do that, the more expensive it is.
Yes.
So if you can kind of do your homework and take a look and see how much did I spend on birthday parties? How much did we spend on extracurricular activities? How much were summer camps and out-of-pocket medical expenses? And now the kids really need counseling. So how do we build that in? What cost is that going to be?
Right. Yeah. Yes. And it's also how, income is how we determine child support, what guideline child support would be, and who should pay child support and things like that. So.
And also temporary spousal support.
Yes.
So
yeah.
We hear a lot that Texas is not an alimony state. It's not the preferred. There is some limited exceptions for spousal maintenance. But while a divorce is pending, there's community property. And so, the courts understand that bills need to get paid. And it's
more common to have temporary spousal than final, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you can get both. I don't want to discourage people. You always need to talk to your attorney.
That's exactly right.
To figure out what is best for you and what the law says you can get. So, yeah.
And I think the thing that's really important to drive home is just that, you have a lot of control over the costs when it comes to this discovery. And the more organized you can be, the more, on top of it you can be, the much less costly this whole process will be.
Yeah. One of the cases I just finalized recently, it was so easy because the person came day one with all their financial stuff in a package for me, handed it to me, had already given it to the other side. And so all the attorneys knew the information that we were working with, and it settled really quick.
Yeah,
so.
It does. It just streamlines that process, as opposed to, we also want to acknowledge this can be completely overwhelming.
Yes.
And a lot of people have a very difficult time getting started on that.
Yeah. It can be like an extra job. And especially if you are not used to dealing with the finances and you don't like it, it can take more time. That's okay too.
But the most important thing is to make sure you're communicating with your legal team. Don't become non-responsive.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes it can be, people go missing all of a sudden when we ask them for the information. So we know we work with people all the time who aren't accustomed to, providing this level of detail. And we can help you with that if we know that you need help.
Yes. Yep.
Excellent.
We can let you know what we need.
Any other tips or tricks when it comes to information gathering?
Just sooner the better. And anything you can get is usually cheaper or more cost effective than.
And we did talk about this too. Make sure you get it legally.
Yes.
So if you can't get it legally, you do not need to break the law. If it is not your account, it's not in your name, you don't have the password, you don't have access. That's okay. We're going to help. We know the ways to go around getting it. You don't need to do anything illegal.
You don't need to become your own private detective.
No.
Yes, because there are actually laws that you could get in trouble for breaking.
Very serious.
If you're getting on other people's devices and logging into their accounts and things.
That's right.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. And just to, I'll throw out here, we've done other episodes on this specifically, but in the state of Texas, generally you can record conversations to which you're a party. That's not true in other states. So if you're in Florida on a family vacation, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
But sometimes people think that they need to record every interaction, or they set up recording devices in the home, and that can create lots of problems.
Yeah, and I know different attorneys give different advice on this. I'll tell you my personal opinion. I don't like a ton of that. If you're going for something in particular and a certain time that you want to get a particular event, then go ahead, do it. But it also can create a lot of an environment of tension. If the person figures out that you're recording them, it can backfire on you because they can play it against you. You also might record yourself doing things that you don't think are bad. One thing I have found is oftentimes people don't understand necessarily when they are behaving in a way that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Which everybody's blind, I think, a little bit to their own selves. So Yeah, I see. It can be a double-edged sword.
It really can.
But at the same time, if things are really going south and you want to start recording, that's okay too.
But I would say just make sure you talk with your legal team when you get advice about what is good to record and what's not good to record. Because it's a murky area and you can be the one who ends up in hot water.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming and talking with us today about all the legal information that's needed in a divorce case.
Thank you. I'm so happy to do this.
We're going to provide a checklist that you can download in our show notes today. And we hope that you will tune in for future episodes. And we look forward to having you continue to follow us. Thank you.